May I come in, sir?
Yes, please come.
Good morning, sir.
Come in, please.
Good morning, ma'am.
Please take a seat.
Thank you.
Mr. Akash Garg,
Yes, sir.
please introduce yourself to the board.
So my name is Akash Garg. I was born in Meerut, and most of my schooling is from Meerut only, except for 2 years. I did my 10th standard from Birla School, Pilani, and my mother is a housewife, father is a businessman. I did my graduation in civil engineering from IIT Roorkee in 2016, and since then I've been preparing for civil services.
Excellent. Madam, please.
Yeah, so Akash, I was just wondering, you're from Meerut, and Meerut has a very rich history. Can you just talk about it? First of all, what was the original name of Meerut?
So, ma'am, the name of Meerut goes back to the mythological origins. It was called Maharashtra on the name of the kingdom of Mayasur, I think. And it has its origins in the ancient valley civilization also, because there are excavations found at Sinoli, Bagpat, dating to that time. And in the modern history, it has a...
Bagpat is a part of Meerut or it's a separate district?
Earlier it was part of Meerut district. Now it is a separate district, part of Meerut division.
Yeah, go on about Meerut.
And then in the modern history, it has a very important event of the First War of Independence, 1857, created to its history.
Any other interesting thing about Meerut?
Ma'am, mainly it has mythological reasons dating back to Mahabharatas.
And what about this specific place, Malyana?
Yes, ma'am. Malyana has its name in the history because of the communal riots that happened in 1987.
That's all. And you are engineering a student, you have opted for mathematics as a mains exam. And which attempt was this?
This is my last attempt, ma'am, 6th attempt.
Because you did, I think, in 2016 you did, and you didn't work anywhere since.
No, ma'am. I have been preparing full time for the...
And appearing for civil service. Okay. Now, there's lots of disaster happening nowadays, not only in India but across the world. So disasters, can you just define disaster?
Disaster, ma'am, is a calamity that can be natural and man-made that leads to mortality of human lives and other destruction.
So disasters are generally natural or generally man-made?
These are both natural and man-made.
No, every disaster is both, or some of them are natural or some of them are man-made?
They are natural events. If we are not prepared, then it can lead to a disaster. For example, the earthquake.
Achha, this is natural phenomena, which is aggravated, I'll say, by the human
Yes, ma'am.
behavior. Okay, so can you just talk about some of the disasters which occurred recently, either in India or somewhere abroad?
The more frequent disaster that is happening in India is one is urban flooding, and then earthquake has not happened from a time, and then drought is again a disaster which leads to famine conditions and agricultural reduction.
What about what is happening in Joshimath? Will you put it in the category of disaster?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Are you aware of Disaster Management Act? Tell us something about this act.
It was formulated in 2005 to provide a framework for the management of disaster. It has a structural framework from the national level to the...
Tell us about the structural framework.
Ma'am, there is National Disaster Management Authority headed by the Prime Minister. Then there is State Disaster Management Authority, then District Disaster Management Authority.
Okay. Do you wonder that during COVID, this act was invoked? So how relevant was it?
The problem we faced in COVID was not precedented, so it was evoked in Epidemic Act and the National Disaster Management Act.
And was it helpful?
It was evoked to implement the lockdown measures across the.
That is what I'm asking you, how it was helpful in dealing with that crisis.
It was helpful to the extent that it curtailed the spread of the coronavirus across the nation, whereas by putting restrictions on flight and the mobility of people across the states. So to an extent it was very helpful.
What is the principle of disaster management?
Ma'am, disaster management has two to three factors, which is preparation, mitigation, and then rehabilitation.
There is lots of corruption in the election in our country. So, first of all, tell me which law deals with the election and its procedure and everything.
There is Representation of People's Act 1950 and 1951. Then there is Model Code of Conduct. Then there is Conduct of Election Rules.
And there is Election Commission of India. So why they are not able to control, despite all these, code of conduct, law, commission, and everything? But corruption is rampant. Rather, it is increasing, and the use of money.
Yes, ma'am. The use of money has been the major hurdle in curtailing the corruption in India.
So there is a control over it, how much you can spend.
Yes, ma'am. The electoral bonds has put a certain amount of transparency, but it is not. It requires certain reforms, whereas which puts the party.
So it requires. So it has not been thought yet.
I'm not sure about, ma'am. The Supreme Court has still to give a verdict about the electoral bond.
What is the name of the case?
I'm not sure about.
Are you aware of NOTA? This is my last question, and how relevant it is.
None of the above NOTA is abbreviated. It is a neutral. It is not a negative vote because it is not validated. The vote is not counted. So to make NOTA relevant, it should be.
If sometime in the counting NOTA is on the highest, so what should be the status of that particular locality's election?
Currently, it has no relevance to as such because.
What is your opinion?
It should be put to consideration as to why the people of the certain constituency has not selected any of the candidates. So I think
it should be the seat should be cancelled, or somehow re-election should be held.
Okay, tell me, you're from Malyana, of course. You said it is known by the riots of Malyana. So what is the relation between the Malyana and Hashimpura?
So both the places saw the riots of 1987 simultaneously. So Hashimpura massacre has got its verdict where the culprits are punished, whereas the Malyana massacre has not seen the justice.
Not justice yet. Why do you think that this thing is being delayed? There's a role of the police, and the PAC was also questioned in that particular Malyana incident. Are you aware of the fact? So I just want to ask you, why at times police functions in a very partisan manner, and especially under the influence of the political party whoever is in power?
So the condition of policemen in the country is not very good, especially at the lower levels, because the working hours are not very objective, and there's a very huge amount of pressure on the policemen from various sources, from the public. Then there is district administration, and then political bosses are there.
So who do you think is responsible? A poor thanedar or a poor constable? He is responsible for all this nonsense, or is it someone else to be blamed? Aren't the higher officials to be blamed? That you political pressure. We are supposed to sustain the pressure and let it not go to the down below.
So the person in charge of the law and order of the place is responsible and answerable for any mishappening that takes place there, especially from the side of the policemen.
No, no, I'm saying that the main problem is the political pressure. What exactly is a political pressure? People say of political pressure. In your view, what is a political pressure?
So I think the political pressure amounts to the biasness in dealing with the public, where a certain people favors their own community as regard.
No, no. So now tell me, you as a civil servant, are you bound to succumb to the political pressure, or you can resist the political pressure?
So we are not supposed to succumb to the political.
Why do the people succumb? That is what I'm asking you now.
I'm not sure about it.
Anyway, chalo. You are a civil engineer. So suppose you become the CEO of National Highway Authority of India, the company which makes roads, the government organization. Okay. And your minister wants a road to be constructed, a greenfield express. You must be knowing greenfield expressway from Meerut to Agra. The minister calls you and he says, okay, we want a road to be made here. So how will you go about it? First step as a civil engineer, and then please explain.
So first a detailed project report has to be prepared as to where the road will fall on the places, and it should be planned in a way that the minimum land should be acquired from the people, and there are few cross drainage works across the path, and so that minimum use of bridges is used. So these are some aspects from the civil engineering point of view.
Tell me, in the beginning, won't you do the feasibility study whether it is feasible, economically feasible to make this road or not? Won't that be the first step?
Yes, sir. I think that would be covered in the detailed project report.
DPR comes later on. The initial feasibility report is prepared, and then you convince the minister, okay, this is not feasible, let's not do it. And if it is feasible, then you go ahead with the DPR. Okay, fine. Now, you are from UP. Huh? So now tell me, how many police commissioner system have been introduced in UP now?
So I don't recall the exact numbers, but they are in Noida, it is there, then Ghaziabad, and Kanpur, it is there, Lucknow, and I'm not sure about the Varanasi.
Okay, fine. Now, give me, there's a term called judicial activism, where the judiciary goes in the domain of, say, executive or legislative also. So can you give me one example of a good judicial activism and a bad judicial activism?
I think, sir, the introduction of public interest litigation was a good judicial activism. And then frequent interference in the domain of legislature and executive.
I just wanted an example because there are so many cases happening.
I think, sir, one example was the banning of liquor shops along the highways because...
Absolutely correct, absolutely correct. My last question, what has IIT Roorkee gained by becoming IIT? Before that also it was a very prestigious institute, University of Roorkee. So what has it gained or lost?
So by getting the tag of IIT, it comes directly under the Ministry of Education with certain autonomy and independence in its functioning. It is guided by the IIT Roorkee Act, and it has a authority to generate funds. And
thank you.
Please, ma'am.
Akash, I'd just like to ask you something about, have you heard of Operation Dost?
Yes, ma'am.
What was it?
Ma'am, it was a humanitarian and disaster relief provided to Turkey and Syria, considering the earthquake. Ma'am, the earthquake of magnitude above 7.8 struck the eastern Turkey and northern Syria.
And as a civil engineer, why do you think there was so much damage in some parts and not in others? Some buildings stood, some buildings collapsed. So what is the reason for that?
Ma'am, from the civil engineering point of view, there were two main defects that were found in the buildings that collapsed. One was the site-specific modification was not done considering the seismicity of the region before constructing the building. And there was very few reinforcement used in the buildings that could not provide the flexibility to the buildings.
For withstanding that level of
Yes, ma'am.
in India, are we doing it? Yeah, the shear stress. Are we doing it in India? Are we following those norms in India? Or maybe in Delhi or maybe in Meerut or wherever? Are we following those norms?
Yes, ma'am. There are codes which pertain to the seismic protection to the buildings. These norms are being followed. Yes, ma'am.
Quake resilient.
Yes, ma'am.
So is it quite effective? Joshimath and all again saw this great problem. So do you think it was not followed there? Of course, besides being on a seismic and unstable sort of hillsides, but did it?
Ma'am, in the Joshimath incidents, the main issue was the land subsidence because of the fragile ecology there. So the engineering norms were followed, but it has a limitation to which it protects the buildings.
Okay. Then let me just ask you, have you heard of India's neighborhood first policy?
Yes, ma'am.
What do you know about it briefly, and how successful has it been?
Ma'am, we have moved from the look east to act east policy, in which the neighborhood comes where we have to maintain good relations with our neighbors like Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar.
We've always been trying to maintain good relations. So what is specific about the current neighborhood first policy?
For example, if we take the Myanmar issue, we have not posed sanctions on Myanmar on the global domain, rather than we have preferred to deal it on a bilateral basis with the Myanmar, because we have to deal with Myanmar whether or not the...
Which countries are covered in our neighborhood first policy?
Ma'am, the countries which are sharing borders,
Can you name them?
yes, ma'am, starting from the Nepal, then Bhutan, then China is there, then Myanmar, and in the Indian Ocean, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and then Pakistan is there.
So what do we see happening on this side of the border with our neighbors?
Ma'am, from the Pakistan side. In the Pakistan side.
Pakistan and China. What
ma'am.
is happening? Briefly tell me.
Ma'am, we are trying to deal with China to put so that we can bring it on the table for a dialogue and discussion.
For what?
For the securing of our borders, because China has been aggressive with regard to its salami slicing policy.
What underlies this policy of China? Why does it insist on this kind of, there was peace for some years, and now again in the recent years we've seen, starting from Galwan, how they've started, sort of being assertive. So what do you think would be the reason for this?
I think it's the policy of China has always been to pose itself as a superpower, where it armed to the smaller nations like in South China Sea, and with regard to India also.
So, what is the basic reason? Why does it not, why are these skirmishes there constantly?
I think the global engagement that has been increased between India and the United States, and the Quad grouping that is formed in the Pacific Ocean.
This happened before, Quad came after. So essentially, there's no demarcation of the line of act. That's why it's called a line of actual control. And China thinks it's not in its interest. It thinks it's in its interest to carry on keeping it, boiling, and to put India down and not challenge it, right? So how has India handled this whole thing? Has it handled it rightly? Has our foreign policy approach been correct with respect to China?
Ma'am, we have tried to put dialogue first with the China, and with regard to every platform, be it SCO, BRICS, or the G20, the Foreign Minister Summits about to held. And we have also given answer of aggression with aggression, like in Doklam we have seen.
Not the India of the 1962.
Yes, ma'am. We are focusing more on the infrastructure development on the border areas.
So what do we need to do?
And we have to strengthen our military efforts, engage China globally on the international platforms, engage more in defense cooperation with United States and Russia. And
And what is happening with Pakistan?
And Pakistan, we have certain conditions before the dialogue to be started.
What condition?
To not bring out the issue of POK, because Pakistan has put the condition that first it needs to.
Or of our Jammu and Kashmir. We keep saying talk about Jammu and Kashmir first, then we'll talk to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Although that's a precondition that they're putting.
Yes, ma'am.
POK is what we are saying is ours.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Last question. You play Sudoku.
Yes,
How
ma'am.
good are you at it? How quickly do you solve a question?
Depending on the difficulty of
I
the.
also asked him this last time.
Depending on the difficulty, I took at the 4th or 5th grade, I took maximum 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
Yes, ma'am.
And the quickest?
Quickest around 8 minutes to solve the Sudoku.
नहीं, but जो level 2 के होते हैं वो तो ऐसे हो जाते हैं.
I'm not that proficient.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So, since you are from civil engineering background, so I want to touch upon this infrastructure. So, government has been increasing budget allocations year on year. So, can you name some major sub areas in which this government is planning?
So in this budget, the capital expenditure outlay has been increased to 10 lakh crores. The major projects being the construction of national highways, expressways, maintenance of old expressways and highways. Then there is green energy infrastructure that is to be created. And
How big is this 10 lakh crores?
I'm sorry, sir.
How big is this 10 lakh crores compared to GDP or compared to last year allocations?
So it has increased quite from a significant amount from the last year budget, and currently we need more investment to achieve our 5 trillion economic target.
So, with respect to infrastructure projects, so touching relating it to the logistics. So, why India still has not utilized its full potential when it comes to the railways for the logistics?
So railways has traffic issues because it has to carry the passengers also and the freight also. The infrastructure has been constantly upgraded because the rails are not efficient enough to carry the high-speed trains on them. So it is being upgraded. So it will take a time.
So, with respect to budget, I think, so there is a lot of talk about the vision for the so India. So what are the main focus areas?
So the main focus areas are the economic superpower by the 2047, then Atmanirbhar Bharat, to be self-reliant on and to act and to be a global superpower in terms of green energy, food security, and in poverty reduction.
So let me touch on this foreign affairs. So there is a lot of recently Saudi has proposed for mediating this war, Ukraine and Russia. Are you aware of that?
I'm sorry, sir, which country?
Saudi.
Saudi Arabia.
So before that, China has proposed some 12-point agenda or something like that, and US was talking about India's mediation. So do you see that there is an emergence of the non-US, non-Russian forces or multilateralism in the global scenario?
Yes, sir. There has been rise in multilateralism after the end of Cold War, and nowadays the goodwill of India has increased because, as we have seen, the US is asking India to mediate between the Ukraine and Russia, and India is considered as a responsible player in the geopolitics, and India has always stood for multilateralism with pending reforms at the UN General Assembly and the UNSC. So yes.
there is a rise of this word called India first. So in what context this word is being, this phrase is being used
India first.
in terms of foreign policy?
I'm sorry, sir, I'm not aware of this.
So, and you have kept one of your area of interest or area of work in the integrated rural development. Can you name some schemes in this regard?
So there's
Schemes?
Jal Jeevan Mission, then PM Awas Yojana is there in the current budget outlay, and then there was Swachh Bharat Mission was there, and then there was schemes for school children, women, like Ujjwala Yojana for indoor cooking fuel, and there is midday meal scheme for the school children, which pertains to their malnutrition also. So there are many schemes, and these are some important ones.
So there is a talk about this rationalization of these schemes to prevent overlapping of the goals and objectives. So do you think government is taking some steps in this regard?
So yes, sir, there are many centrally sponsored schemes which are being overlapped, and there are center sector schemes. So centrally sponsored schemes, the budget outlay is continuously decreasing, so that these can be rationalized.
So pass it on.
Right. Thank you. So, Mr. Akash Garg,
Yes, sir.
in Meerut, the popular law and order theory is that whenever there is a certain mix of population of two communities, it's volatile mix. What is that percentage? Are you aware of it?
I'm sorry, sir, I couldn't understand.
Whenever two communities have a certain mix of population, percentage of population, the situation is volatile. To give you an example, if one community is 80%, the other is 20%, it will not result in riots. Now what? What is that volatile mix? Are you aware?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay. Anyway, which is why some places riots happen, some places it don't happen. Are you aware of this mission Shakti? When India shot down a satellite in outer space,
Yes, sir.
right?
Yes.
What was the big deal about it? There are all the time there are SAMs, there are Akash missiles, there are, you can shoot down any aircraft using a Stinger missile. So what is this big deal about you shooting down a satellite? How's it different?
So there are limitations to the shooting down of an aircraft using the integrated guided missile program is there, but India has demonstrated its capability to shoot down a satellite, which only few limited countries are having.
That's there, but what is the technological difference? You aim, you shoot. Similarly to an aircraft, if the sniper is, or rather, the person who's holding the Stinger missile, the shoulder-held missiles, they shoot it down. You see the Iron Dome, the S-400, they're all about shooting down an aerial object. So how is the technology any different? You are an engineering student, that's why I'm asking you.
So I'm not very sure about that specific technology, but I think the challenge is with regard to the navigation of the missile to hit the satellite at the precise location. So that the debris that fall from the satellite may not fall into a foreign territory I'm not sure about.
We are not bothered about the debris as and when they fall. But you are partly right. You shoot a satellite when it has to come to a certain point, and you have to shoot where the satellite will be.
Yes, sir.
As unlike this particular shooting down an aircraft, because your missile always follows the infrared signature of that aircraft, isn't it? So
Yes,
wherever, even if the aircraft goes somewhere,
it can follow.
Missile will follow. But this is a highly calculation specific,
Yes, sir.
technology. Very quick one. What do you know about the nuclear submarines and AIP submarines, which are not nuclear submarines? Why are the AIP submarines, Kalveri class, so much in INS Kalveri, Scorpion class, why are they in use?
I'm not aware of it.
Okay.
AIP submarines.
AIP, air independent propulsion. They don't require, they're stealth submarines. Anyway, India has just inducted one of them.
Okay.
Well, anyway, we are finished with your interview formally.